Okay, thank you everyone for joining us. We are right at 10 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us today as we explore using data to prioritize your sustainable packaging initiatives. Joining us today, we have Diane Marret. She is the Sustainability Director for Consumer Packaging North America. She has worked in the plastics industry for over 15 years, as well as the home appliance and automobile industries. Her team manages a portfolio of activities aimed at achieving sustainability goals through a variety of activities, such as material science projects, supplier development, and collaborating with customers to educate and align on sustainability goals. Before we hand it over to Diane, we first have a couple housekeeping items. A recorded version of this webinar will be available after today's session. As always, please be encouraged to utilize the Q&A button for asking questions throughout the presentation. At the end of Diane's presentation, we will open it up and address some of those questions today. If you're experiencing technical difficulties or any other issues, please notify our team via the chat function on your Zoom screen. And later during the Q&A portion, we'll be asking you for some feedback. So a poll will automatically appear on your Zoom screen, and we'd love it if you would provide your ratings for us. With that being said, I will happily hand it over to Diane.
All right, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Just here, some quick contact information if you need to reach me directly anytime. But we'll go ahead and jump right in. So thanks again for taking time out of your day to join us. Sustainability in consumer goods packaging has changed fairly significantly in recent years. Major retailers are actively driving sustainability considerations into the products they put on their shelves. And consumer brands are making big commitments and integrating sustainability into their brand promise. International initiatives are driving transparency and accountability throughout the entire value chain. And we're here today because we've all made the stance that sustainability is critical to all aspects of our business. So first, I'll share here a handful of impactful sustainability goals within our industry. So just to name a few: Conagra, Kroger, Pepsi, General Mills, Hormel, Danone, NicePack, BP, and Berry Global. These publicly stated goals are being shaped through a variety of forces, whether it's Ellen MacArthur, US Plastics Pact, even retailers like Walmart are driving the development of these very publicly shared goals. It's important for all of us to understand what these key goals look like and what they do to drive our industry. Berry Global is definitely a leader in sustainable packaging solutions, and we've also got similar goals ourselves. We achieve our goals when you achieve your goals. It's easy to see where there are some common goals. Portfolios targeted to be 100% recyclable, compostable, or reusable, reducing unnecessary and wasteful packaging, including recycled content, and reducing carbon emissions. These are all fairly similar, and we see these throughout many of these publicly shared goals. Ellen MacArthur recently shared a progress report from signatories of the New Plastics Economy Global Commitment. The report looks at how signatories, which together account for more than 20% of plastic packaging, how they're faring against these targets that have been shared. They've reported that 17% of companies have eliminated problematic or unnecessary packaging. And in the goal to reach 100% reusable, recyclable, or compostable portfolios, the reported progress is 65%. Post-consumer recycled content in plastic packaging was reported to be 6.2%. So the key message is that while there has been great progress, there's definitely urgency to do more, to do it faster, in order to meet some of these tight deadlines like 2025. Sustainability is a guiding force for us all. Everything we touch has an impact on sustainability in some way. So how do we decide what's important? How do we know what will contribute the greatest impact towards our shared goals? This is a short list of potential options that may have already been under consideration in your company. Reducing the amount of material used in your packaging, looking at ways of transitioning heavier packaging substrates to lighter weight alternatives, converting multi-substrate packaging into single substrate packaging, redesigning something that's not nestable to something that is, converting from a round package to a non-round package, including post-consumer or bio-based resins into your package, transitioning to lower carbon impact manufacturing processes. We're looking to source from a more regional packaging supplier to reduce carbon emissions. So then the question becomes, how do we decide what to work on next? And what's preventing us from making those decisions? We know the circular economy goals in front of us are really complex and they impact each of us very differently. Ask someone in operations about the impact of qualifying a new sustainable material, or ask your sales force what they're hearing from their customers. The takeaway is that each functional area has a different take on the problem and the solution. Time. Projects take time, implementation takes time, training to do all these things takes time, and realistically, we're running out of time. Money. Sustainability projects can require capital, and we know there's competing interests lobbying for each of that capital bucket. So how do we determine the benefits outweighing the cost of this? And looking at ways that we're impacting our manufacturing processes. And lastly, just the uncertainty. What yields the biggest return? Will my customer even care? Do they understand what we're doing? How do we prioritize all of these projects based on the impacts? And has COVID changed how we do business? All valid questions. And we're not necessarily going to solve everything today, but one approach we can take to address these questions is to take a data-driven approach to making key sustainability decisions. So let's start off by trying to identify the sustainable packaging change opportunities in your portfolio. And I'll say here that while these concepts and questions aren't necessarily new, they're a great place to start to identify your target opportunities and work through the methods to prioritize those. Some of those questions that you might have are, is the material of your package fully recyclable? Is the package optimized to its ideal weight? What is the result of changing the substrate type? Is your package nestable, or have you maximized your pack out? And how much impact will including post-consumer recycled content or a bio-based resin have on the carbon footprint? Did any of these questions make you think of something that could apply to a packaging format in your portfolio? We'll have an opportunity later for you to submit your specific ideas, so jot down any thoughts you may have now or as we go through some of these examples later, and we'll come back to those and ask you to submit those. So let's jump to the tools that we can use to capture sustainability data and ultimately use them to help prioritize our efforts. We'll start here with a life cycle assessment description. So life cycle assessment is a methodological framework to assess environmental impacts associated with all stages of a product's life, from raw material extraction through material processing, manufacture, distribution, use, repair and maintenance, and disposal or recycling. We pair this with a freight calculator, and that gives us some great ways to quantify a packaging impact. The life cycle assessment software might not necessarily be new to you. Commonly, it's used after a project is complete to evaluate the impact. But the question today is, have you considered using it as part of your development process in order to prioritize your work? First, let's identify the details that are needed in order to complete an assessment. First, we always need to know what the volume is, how many units we're addressing in this particular comparison. What's your current pack out? What's the weight of the package? What's the location, the miles from the supplier to the facility? What type of material is being utilized? And you should identify each material within the package type. And then identifying lastly the manufacturing process. Now let's walk through an example using all of those data inputs. This example is a multi-material composite can that's being converted to an all-plastic container. To the right are the needed LCA software and freight calculator inputs. You'll notice in this example, we've chosen different distances, the new container being sourced from a further distance away. But the nestable package allows us to get more parts on a truck, plus it's lighter weight. So first, we'll quickly identify the freight advantages. More parts per truck mean fewer trucks needed annually, less diesel fuel used, and ultimately a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. Composite cans Composite cans do present a sustainability challenge. Major retailers, namely Walmart, have identified composite cans as change in their recycling playbook. So converting to a single substrate package addresses that specific request. Further, improving nestability and creating a reusable package offers additional benefits. Finally, we can complete the evaluation and use the tools to quantify greenhouse gas emissions for each package format. In this example, we've determined that by converting to the single substrate, non-round, nestable polypropylene container, that 98 metric tons of greenhouse gas are saved per year. This, in combination with the freight and the package manufacturer itself, gives us that total of 98 metric tons. In turn, we can then convert them to other equivalents. In this example, 98 metric tons of greenhouse gas is equivalent to removing 21 passenger vehicles off the road for a year, 227 barrels of oil, or carbon sequestered from 128 acres of U.S. forest in a year. To give this more definition to be less of an abstract idea, here's a quick visual to show that the size of 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide gas would fill a cube 26 feet 8 inches tall, and a cube of 1,000 metric tons is almost as tall as the Statue of Liberty. So now that we've walked through this example, let's move on to a few other examples and show how they compare. These examples are formats found commonly in North America, but they do have complementary formats globally. For this exercise, we've used common market volumes for the package format, and in the case where freight was added, we used a common 200 miles for distance. The 6 package formats that we'll compare are, first, converting a non-nestable multi-substrate spice can to a nestable single substrate container. Second is lightweighting a 6-ounce polypropylene yogurt container. Third is converting a glass jar to a round plastic container. Fourth is lightweighting and converting a nestable wipes container. Fifth is adding 35% post-consumer recycled material to a 5-gallon industrial pail. And the last one, 6th, is looking at a 4-ounce polyethylene container using 100% bio-based polyethylene. All right, so back to that first case study. So we'll go through this actual assessment. Again, this first one is a mixed material packaging converting to a single substrate package, similar to the example we covered earlier. This is a metal spice can that, as exists today, is a non-recyclable format. In this example as well, is not nestable. So using the LCA software, we can determine that the package manufacturer alone at 1 million units results in 80 metric tons of greenhouse gas savings per year. And again, we can put that into the other equivalents for comparison. Our next example is a change to the package to reduce weight and make slight improvements to nestability. This is a standard 6-ounce polypropylene yogurt cup. And in this case, the package weight was reduced by 8.5%. At 25 million units, the resulting greenhouse gas savings is 60 metric tons of CO2. Again, this is at 25 million units. So if there was opportunity to have a higher volume, obviously you would have a higher impact on that greenhouse gas savings per year. All right, our third example, conversion from a glass jar to a polypropylene container. Glass is energy intensive to produce, it's heavy to transport, and requires extensive packaging to prevent breakage. And depending on how far the glass is sourced, the freight savings can be significant. First, we'll show the LCA without freight, just package manufacture by itself. So at 1 million units, the package manufacturer alone is 231 metric tons of greenhouse gas saved per year. Pretty significant. Now we'll add in the freight. And as a reminder, this is only 200 miles. So if the glass is coming, say, from another continent, the freight savings will add up incredibly fast. So in this instance, with freight added and the package manufacturer, we come to a total of 242 metric tons of greenhouse gas saved per year. All right, our next example is a lightweighting and improved nestability conversion, this time in a larger package format that we've all probably become pretty familiar with this past year, wipes containers. The current design is blow molded and not nestable. The new design can be lighter weight and made using a more efficient process. So first, let's start with the freight impact, since it's significant in this example. With the ability to ship 7.4 times more parts per truckload at 10 million annual units, that's a savings of 247 inbound trucks, 7,600 gallons of diesel fuel, which is worth over $20,000. Very significant and easy to see how it impacts the bottom line. Now, taking the package manufacturer into consideration, the LCA software clearly shows the advantage in this instance of one manufacturing method over another. The resulting greenhouse gas savings is a whopping 542 metric tons of greenhouse gas savings per year. All right, our next example simply incorporates PCR, post-consumer recycled material, into a 5-gallon polyethylene pail. So at 500,000 units, we see this resulting in a CO2 emission of 305 metric tons. So this is fairly significant with a fairly minimal change potentially. All right, our last example is switching a 4-ounce polyethylene container to 100% bio-based polyethylene. The LCA software calculates the environmental savings tied with this type of material and the credits that are associated with it. So making this change with this package at 25 million units, the resulting savings is 284 metric tons of CO2. All right, so now the results of this particular activity and comparing all these different packaging formats, here's a summary of those 6 examples. So are you surprised by any of these results? All right, so looking at where we were from the poll, so it looks like from the poll, people did say that the glass, converting glass to a round plastic container was fairly significant, which it was. But look, what came through here was the nestability of the wipes container. So interesting to see and to share where we were from a results standpoint. All right. All right, so at this point, we'll transition a little bit. So at Berry, we create innovative packaging and engineered products that we believe makes life better for people and the planet. We've got expertise and capabilities to help you execute that plan. We do this every day by leveraging our unmatched global capabilities, sustainability leadership, deep innovation expertise to serve customers of all sizes around the world. Harnessing the strength in our diversity and industry-leading talent of 47,000 global employees across more than 295 locations, we partner with customers to develop, design, and manufacture innovative products with an eye toward circular economy. These challenges we solve, the innovations we pioneer, the challenges we solve and the innovation we pioneer benefit our customers at every stage of the journey. So let's leverage our footprint to bring these advantages geographically closer to you. Sustainable product innovation is part of our history and continues to be a core driver for future innovation. We've regularly instituted many of the concepts that we featured today, many of them in our stock product portfolio. Consider converting to recyclable materials, lightweighting, incorporating recycled content. Are these the solutions you need to address your sustainability goals? We might already have a solution ready, but if not, we can work together to deliver what you need. Lastly, I'll point out that sustainability is a core focus for Berry Global. We have sustainability-focused contacts within each division. Our resources have access to the tools needed to fully develop your desired solutions. Our Blue Clover Studio can create renderings and design concepts similar to the ones you saw in the examples today. Our sustainability teams all regularly utilize the LCA software demonstrated today, utilize Berry's global footprint and purchasing scale to have access to uninterrupted raw material supply and high quality sustainable polymers. Utilize our resources to push your concept from innovation through implementation. So as I wrap up today, I do have a request, and hopefully as we've gone through some of the examples today, you've thought about maybe a few projects that you've been contemplating. You will be receiving a follow-up email from the webinar today, and within that email will be a link to submit a request for an evaluation like we did today. If you don't need, at this point, you don't need to supply all the details, but let us know if there's a few projects you've been considering, and let us help you work through those and evaluate the options. And if you have any other general questions, we do have a general email box as well. So lastly, we're committed to leading you through your own path to sustainable innovation. You likely have several solutions you're already considering, so let us help you prioritize those efforts. So with that, I'll conclude the presentation and turn it back over to our moderator. And thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much, Diane. So we've got several questions flowing in here. So first one is, what does lightweighting look like for Berry?
You know, lightweighting can be a number of different ways of addressing it. It can be simply a redesign opportunity where you found ways to take out a little bit of material while still maintaining all the same performance properties. It can be a totally new product design, like what we showed today with glass to plastic. That can be considered a lightweighting opportunity as well.
So how does the inclusion of PCR impact lightweighting?
You know, I would say generally there would be no difference. PCR is a material that we're incorporating to take out virgin material and replace it with a recycled content material. But from a lightweighting aspect, if you're not necessarily changing the gram weight of the part, you're just substituting material, you wouldn't necessarily see a difference. It's a reduction in virgin material.
Okay. So how do you balance the carbon footprint evaluation against common recycling goals?
Okay. Yeah, in some cases, the LCA may show a positive result for a particular package format, even if it isn't necessarily a desirable format for recyclability. So it is important to maintain your overall goals and select materials that make the package fully recyclable.
Okay, so speaking of carbon footprint, we're getting a question that says, where can you find the tools to calculate freight and emissions?
Yeah, there's a variety of tools available. We have a particular software package that we use that's a very common industry standard LCA software package. It does also incorporate content as well. There are some separate calculators that you can use to simply do some quick calculations, but really there's a variety of options available.
Okay. So we are getting a couple questions on whether or not the slides will be available after the webinar. So the slides will not be available, but the recording of the webinar will be available. So let's see here. Next question is, can chemical recycling formats be compared in LCA tools?
Yes, there are LCA studies that have been completed already to specifically address the impact of what we call advanced recycled materials, which are commonly also known as chemical recycled materials. Those are definitely something that we'll be seeing more of, I think, in the near term. But absolutely, those are being considered as part of LCA software packages.
Okay, just a reminder for anyone who's entering their questions into the chat, if you could please push them over into the Q&A section, that would be great. So one major barrier is the lack of knowledge on how to collect and manage and analyze data in terms of sustainability. Do you know of online training courses for employees with little data analysis and sustainability backgrounds to learn how to start monitoring and prioritizing sustainability?
I would say first and foremost, reach out to your suppliers. And this is something that we offer as part of our services back to our customers, and certainly we'll do whatever we can to help evaluate and help prioritize. I believe there are some online access for very simple tools, but realistically, if you're in a position where you're looking to really make an impact and truly identify where to put your resources, it's best to work with somebody with the tools like what we have at our disposal.
Okay, so this is one that comes up a lot. What recommendations do you have for packages that are too small for the current U.S. recycling system?
There are definitely ways that you can long-term address the size of the package and potentially make it larger. Things like closures, we do follow APR's guidance of keeping closures on the bottle. That helps keep them captured into the recycling stream. And certainly, we're always working with our MRFs and the equipment and things that they're using to evaluate if certain formats can be captured better than they are today with equipment that's available.
So I know you covered some of this in your presentation, but what packaging formats do you believe have the greatest opportunities for change?
I would say all packaging formats obviously have opportunity for carbon footprint improvements. The software does allow for a wide variety of materials to be analyzed, whether it's glass or even films, non-wovens, multi-substrate materials, different types of recycled content. But really, it's a combination of all the inputs that ultimately will determine your greatest impact. So taking into account volume and weight and manufacturing location, all of those things are really necessary to get a clear view of what the analysis should look like. And while there might be some low-hanging fruit that seem somewhat obvious, there's other opportunities that may not be fully visible until the analysis is complete. And so, like going through the example today, there might have been some that were a little more significant than what people might have ultimately guessed originally.
So PCR is a hot topic and not necessarily always as available as we would like. So the question is, does Berry have any supply concerns regarding PCR? And let's go ahead and break this down as to food grade PCR and not food grade PCR.
Yeah, I think everyone's commonly hearing about resin supply issues as a whole, not just PCR. Certainly, PCR streams have been impacted by COVID and other factors. We're managing those just as best as we can. Certainly, food contact streams are much more limited to begin with. And so as we're seeing supply tighten in the industry for all materials, this is certainly impacting this particular space as well. So I will say, yes, we are seeing these same supply concerns, but we're doing our best as a large company to manage those and to be sure that we've got access to the right supply.
Are there available regulatories that would help communicate this great information specifically to our customers?
Not sure if I completely understand the question, but I guess what I'll say is if there are specific questions about regulatory requirements and materials, certainly work with your supplier. That's something that we have resources in place to address any regulatory concerns. I think that's something that, depending on what specific area that they're looking for, work with the supplier.
Okay. So we actually have Rob Flores on the line as well. So anybody who's joined our webinars before, you probably know Rob. He's our Vice President of Sustainability. He's going to share a little bit of information about the LCA software that we're using. We're getting a lot of questions about that. So Rob, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Amy. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah, and actually, I think Diane could have answered that one, but we use a Sierra LCA software. We've been using it across our divisions to make sure that we have a standard approach for how we consider these things. And, we've been pretty pleased so far. Obviously, no one tool is perfect, but we do believe it's incredibly important to understand, carbon footprint and other life cycle impacts in the design phase. So we're really excited to have this important tool and incorporate it into our process.
Okay. So next question is, what is your view of the future of polypropylene recycling improvements nationwide? This could be Diane or Rob.
Diane, do you want to take this one? I've already jumped in.
I'll let you go, Rob.
Yeah, I mean, I think polypropylene, obviously after bottles, polypropylene really is, in the rigid recycling stream, the next most thing recycled. It's growing tremendously in recycling. If you look over time, when I first started here at Berry, there was hardly any polypropylene, post-consumer polypropylene recycling. And then now it's commonplace, and roughly 60% of the population here in the U.S. has access to recycle it. The recyclability is also growing in Europe and other countries. So I think we're on a tremendous trajectory for polypropylene recycling. I think we'll only see more polypropylene recycling. And then as Berry, we're making sure to take steps to increase demand for recycled polypropylene, because we believe that demand will drive supply. Right, so if we can create demand, it will pull through that recyclable polypropylene and get it sorted at the material recovery facilities, and ultimately create PCR that we can use back into our products. So we believe it's very important for Berry to represent that demand, especially with Berry being such a large player. They'll really help us pull through the existing supply that is not being sorted today.
All right, thanks, Rob. Next question for the group is, can you address your assumptions about plastic recyclability in the U.S.? This person says it basically is not recyclable, yet that seems to be a key input in your calculations.
Yeah, so I'd be happy to take that one. In the software, they assume U.S. average. We can run it based on U.S. or Europe. We do have... like I said, we do use the same tool globally, so depending on where the customer is located, we would affect how we model it. But essentially, the existing known recycling rates are built into the software, and that is taken into consideration. And obviously, not as many plastics are being recycled today as we would like. But to say plastic is not recycled when over 6 billion pounds of post-consumer plastic are recycled in the U.S. alone each year. It's kind of misleading. I mean, obviously on a percentage basis, it's lower than we would like, but a significant amount of post-consumer plastics get recycled. And then especially recently, as quite frankly, virgin prices are creeping back up, so are recycled plastic prices. And I think that's just going to drive more and more demand. I really do believe we're on the cusp of getting to where we all believe we need to be, which is why so many of us have committed to these 2025 goals, is because we realized those would be the catalyst for the changes that we needed to see.
All right. Thank you, Rob. So, Diane, here's a question about one of the examples you gave today. It was the mixed nuts container, and this person is questioning the barrier properties.
Depending on some of those different types of composite cans, they can require a barrier. This particular example was a fairly simple example. Again, we are able to model into the LCA inputs the different types of materials, and we can incorporate barrier properties or not.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yeah, I would add in many cases, depending on the plastic being used, like say, for example, PET has very good oxygen barrier compared to other plastics. So it just depends on the materials. Each material has its own unique barrier properties.
Okay. So we've got a few questions about bioresins here. Number one, can we talk about the availability and cost premium for bio HDPE? And then to piggyback that, if you could please tell us a little bit about what bioplastics we're currently using.
Yeah, sure. So Like a lot of other unique and specialty resins, that bio-based is sourced right now from a single supplier. And then, similar to some of these other specialty resins, there are potentially some cost impacts. So that would be an added piece of an evaluation that you're looking at. But if you're looking at your carbon footprint savings, that's where we're coming in with some of these tools that we're using today, and looking at freight impacts as well.
Okay. Let's see here. We're getting a question about what's happening currently in the polypropylene market. This person's questioning a raw material shortage, which, polypropylene is a key contributor to a lot of our products. Does anybody, Rob or Diane, want to address that?
Yeah, sure. I would take that one. Obviously, the polypropylene market has actually been tight for several months now. The most recent thing to affect that was the recent freeze in Texas, which is obviously compounding the previous issues driving tightness in the market. Before that, one of the key polypropylene suppliers in North America had experienced a fire, which also affected supply. And then additionally, a significant portion of the propylene that comes onto the market is made via propane dehydrogenation. And those assets were also, I know, scheduled to go down for, just scheduled maintenance, which has to occur at times. Obviously, there's been so much demand for polypropylene, especially in the healthcare market, that a lot of those scheduled downtimes have been put off and put off and put off, and then ultimately you eventually have to do that to maintain your assets. So those there has been a lot of shortages affecting the polypropylene market recently. Most of those were unexpected, so hopefully we don't have any more unexpected ones.
Okay, this is a good question. Does bioresin integration always lead to a reduction in CO2?
I guess the nature of using the LCA software is that it does account for the credits and such that go in with those types of material streams. And so, again, you have to look at the total. What are the units? What are the weight? How much are you incorporating? There's a whole lot that would have to go into answering a specific question. But I would say, and yes, in most cases, you would see that reduction.
Okay. Again, we're still getting a lot of questions about the LCA tool. So if you guys could just repeat the name of the LCA tool, please.
Go ahead, Diane.
It's Spira by Gabi. It's the software package that we use. And it's one that we've used for several years. And again, like Rob said, we do use this across all of our divisions, so globally as well.
Okay, thank you. In terms of carbon emissions, what is considered best, PCR or bio-based materials?
Again, I'll go back to it depends. You have to LCA to see the comparison between the two, because it really will depend on a lot of other inputs.
Yeah, if I could build on that one a little bit more. Whenever we use recycled, we tend to see, a drop in the emissions, a pretty healthy drop. With bioplastics, a lot of it does come down to how the bioplastics are made. I know Braskem out there has data on bio-based polyethylene that they produce in Brazil. Not only is it made from a renewable resource, sugarcane, they also produce it using renewable energy, and they actually market that product as carbon negative. So we can, that's obviously why one of the reasons to work with Berry is we do have a suite of solutions and are very knowledgeable about the various benefits and can work with customers to achieve their exact desired goal. Because it's not, as Diane said, it depends. There's not one answer across the board. It does depend, but we're really excited about these, I'll call them circular materials and their ability to decrease our footprint going forward.
Okay. We're also going to go ahead and drop the name of that LCA software into the chat as well, in case anybody needs to see it there as well. So here's another good question. What is the most important data to begin collecting or documenting at our company for measuring overall sustainability impact?
Pretty broad. I would say, anytime that you're making improvements to products, whether it's a lightweighting or incorporating PCR, like these are the opportunities where you need to be capturing your greenhouse gas emissions. And this is just looking at it from a product perspective. If we're going broader than that and you're addressing your operations footprint, certainly there are aspects that can be captured and tracked within that space as well. So if you're just looking at it from a product standpoint, anytime you're touching the product, certainly there's potentially the option of making an impact that would affect sustainability.
And Amy, as you know all too well, I will say that we track a tremendous amount of data, which we are about to publish in our impact report and associated documents. So it's not just, I know people want like one metric, but we track so much data.
Yeah.
Lots of data.
Yeah. Okay, and that much demanded LCA software is in the chat, so go ahead and get it in there, please. Take a look. All right, so we still have a number of questions. Diane, I believe, put her contact information up at the very beginning, but if you have further questions for Diane, feel free to go ahead and reach out to her directly. I want to go ahead and promote our next webinar. It will be about improving patient experience through ophthalmic packaging, and this is March 2nd, which is hard to believe. It's next week. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. As always, keep an eye out on your email and social media platforms for our future webinars. Thank you.